So I should be live. And there's already one person in the queue. Okay, cool. Well, as the title indicates, this is the 100K celebration for this channel, this new channel. And yeah, I'm very happy and very, what's it called? Satisfied that I met this milestone already. I think it took me about 2 years on my first channel to reach 100K. Hello, everyone pouring in. Hello, hello. Thank you all for your immense support. This is so meaningful and touching for me, especially on this new channel. Once again, I feel like this new channel is far more like, can you hear me? Okay, yeah, the audio bar seemed like it was going down a little bit, and I can't really hear myself back through these headphones. Anyways, if you guys are having difficulty with the audio, please do let me know. But yeah, I feel like this channel is a little more personal and real for me, as opposed to my last channel, which was wholly satirical and pretty much just a coping mechanism for the fact that it was immediately started after a confusing time, I guess. But I love this channel, and I'm very glad I reached this milestone, and I'm so thankful for everyone who has accompanied me through this whole transition, this change, who's been there with me from the start, all of the newcomers who just, enjoy the new content that's been developed on the channel. So once again, thank you all for your support and your continuance here. So I'm going to start reading the chat now that a lot of people are pouring in, and I'm going to start answering some of the questions. We can treat this as a Q&A, or I can figure out how to proceed with the different elements of keeping y'all entertained for the next hour, I suppose. If you guys want to pop out, please do, and then come back, please do. This live stream will be archived on my live tab. So, McKinley Puteljak says, "Hi, Angelica, I can't find your hereditary video. Can you please post it on your Angelica Journal channel?" I might re-upload it, or I might upload it onto my Patreon. I haven't decided yet. I feel like that one's a little too, how should I say? It's a little too, it goes over the heads over a lot of people nowadays. It's like a little too niche. But I might re-upload it onto that channel, or I might just make it available on Patreon. Either way, I still haven't decided though. Adaptable says, "Was your first channel banned or something, or hacked?" It was not banned. It's still very active. Well, not active in the sense that I'm still uploading on that channel. I mean, maybe one day I'll maybe upload like once in a while on that channel. It's more so just that channel made me uncomfortable after I converted, mostly because I felt like this great shame of all the jokes that I had made when I was an atheist. And then there were so many videos that didn't even have any religious themes in the title or any religious themes in the video, and I would make like disrespectful jokes or comments in it, and then people would laugh at it still, and I would get like those notifications of people saying that they loved the joke where I was making fun of such and such disciple or apostle, and it just turned my stomach, and it just like really made me really upset that I would say something like that. And yeah, I just decided I can't do it. I have to start new on a different channel, and I have to like make sure that everyone who likes that type of jokes doesn't expect it from me. I'm like, this is not happening here, and it's not happening going forward. It just won't. And it's like, if they enjoyed those jokes, then please do go somewhere else, because it's like those jokes really only come from people who are either A, sincere about their criticism of life and how upset they are with the fact that life seems like it's meaningless and pointless. And it's like they're probably going through a lot of like emotional hardship, coping with the fact that reality is just so bleak and meaningless. And so they make fun of anything that seems divine or sacred, because it's just like it almost reminds them of their own pain. Or B, it comes from those sort of like George Carlin kind of like Reddit kind of atheists, where they think they're geniuses because they deny this like thousands-year-old religion or whatever. And it's always Christianity. They never criticize Islam or Judaism or Hinduism. They couldn't even criticize Hinduism if they tried. They're just like very not educated on any religion whatsoever, but they think they're intelligent because they reject these religions that billions of people hold to be true. Anyways, that was kind of like the reason I moved away. Um, let's see. Moist Salt says, "Your headset, are you a gamer?" Not quite. Um, these headphones came from a relative of mine. I only play The Sims and Animal Crossing and all of those kind of like more girly games. I really hate games that are like point of view shooter games. They just give me anxiety. I just can't stomach it. I'm like, can I just build a farm? Can I live off of my digital farm? Let's see. Oop, I dropped all the way down. How do you get your room so cozy in your latest videos? Asks Dom Manuel. I don't know. I think that as an extension of my mental health having improved over the past like year, certainly, or two, everything else has just kind of followed along. So now it's like my wardrobe is far more curated. My room is a lot more maintained. Everything seems to be a little more stable in general. So I think the coziness of my room, I think, is just, I don't know, it's just like a normal room. So it's not like a huge thing. Eminem says, "Where TF do you live? I swear your backgrounds are never the same." I live in a labyrinth. But now I live in the grass. Let's see. Moist Salt says, "I'm surprised you didn't have 100K a long time ago." I just didn't advertise it on my main channel. A lot of people are oftentimes expressing surprise when they find my channel again, thinking that I just completely went inactive on my main channel. But the only time I ever mentioned this channel on my main channel was in a 2-minute video that I uploaded like over a year ago, and then I took it down. So no one really knew that I transitioned over. It's just basically like, but there was a satisfying piece of it to me where I just wanted to rebuild this channel organically, where it's like no connection to my old one. No one knows about my old one. Well, I mean, a lot of people know about my old one, but it's kind of like, can I do what I did before? Can I repeat that success again organically? And I ended up getting 100K faster than the first time around, which makes sense considering the fan base that I had already collected there, kind of swinging over. But still, it's nice. Can we get the dating female zodiac signs video re-uploaded? I don't know. I don't know. When it comes to like the zodiac or astrology or any of those sort of like occult or pseudo occult sort of like studies, I still think that I don't really think that they're that heavy, or like how some Protestant Christians kind of make it seem to be the sort of like demon hand reaching out through it and then sucking your soul out of your body when you engage with that material. But I also recognize that there's a lot of people who put way too much psychological importance into those like stuff that I just don't want to feed into it. I'm like, yeah, like I get it. It's cute. It's fun. It's like whatever, just girly things or whatever, but you're going too far with it. So that's kind of my thing. So I don't know if I would. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe. I wouldn't necessarily not do it. Let's see. Oh, that's an interesting one. Oh, but that kind of goes hand in hand with the zodiac one. Daddy Diabetic says, "Do a Freemason ritual point of view." That's a really good idea. I've never really considered it just because it's like so dark. Like they simulate like human, I can't really say the word, but yeah, they simulate certain things during the ritual. And it's like the more I find out about it, the more I'm like, ew. But maybe, honestly, I might do like a watered down version of it. But if I do that, then I have to like, I don't know, then I should consider more of the zodiac. Because it's just like, I don't know. It's like, why not? It's like satirical takes on these pagan ideologies, especially ones that kind of like pretend to be something that it really isn't, I guess. Um, Thank you to Patrick Starr for the $10 donation. That was very sweet of you. I didn't see a comment though, and I can't see your username, but I just know it's Patrick Starr. But let's see. Do you always have inspiration for new videos? I guess. Um, it's just things that I find interesting. My brain is kind of like a clay ball that I just kind of roll around on a table, and then whatever it collects, I just kind of think, oh, that's interesting, and I just go along with it. How did you end up on the Whatever podcast? What were your thoughts after you were done with that podcast? Um, I kind of liked the show. I remember I was watching a couple of snippets from it just to kind of understand different angles or different points of view, particularly from people who identify with the red pill. I just kind of wanted to see what the attraction was and like why they were so drawn to it and like what their arguments were. Not necessarily because I wanted to like necessarily validate their arguments, but more so because I just wanted to understand them, nor invalidate their arguments. I just wanted to understand, like, what are you guys on about, basically. And so I basically did the podcast, and I thought that the podcast wasn't as bad as the other Red Pill podcasts, like Fresh and Fit, or now this new one called Fugazi or something like that, or Kevin Samuels. Brian, I can't like Brian is a nice, sweet guy. He's like nice, but the nature of his work stresses him out so much, which you can't blame him for because it's like he's constantly having to talk to women or people in general who are just like everyone there is just like it's so unpredictable. You don't know what they're going to say. It's stress 101 or whatever. But I also thought that I don't know. It's like I felt bad for the girls who did go there because you could clearly tell, and I guess I could tell just as a woman because it's not like I'm going to date these women, but I could tell as a woman that these women had gone through like traumas or hardships. They had endured things or just never had like a reasonable, solid base in their childhood to give them a more fruitful life. And this is just them coping with it. And it's like having a bunch of people who do see better, who do know better, who like have an idea of how life is supposed to be, then judge them when they don't know any better. It saddened me because I'm like, if you know better and they don't, then maybe try to like, if you can't do it, then that's one thing, obviously. But it's like try to like, if you can, guide them through seeing like a different perspective on life. And I think that's kind of how you mend the bridge because I just can't stand gender war culture. I feel like it's the stupidest thing ever. I'm like, men and women are complementary. We do have our own functions. We are different, but that's how we get along. Like, if we were exactly the same, it's like, then why would we need each other? Like, we're exactly the same, but we're complementary. And it's like to have this stoked, arbitrary, artificial, like gender war culture or whatever is just ridiculous. It's like it distracts from the bigger issues, like certain private institutions that pretend to be public institutions robbing us of our money every month, and then creating a society where inflation runs rampant, and then they're funding all of these devastating policies in other countries that we don't even have any involved or we don't even want any involvement with, that we then have to hold responsibility for. If anyone catches my drift. Let's see. Can we ask what happened to many of your videos on your journal channel? I kind of wanted to maintain that channel as being a little more mainstream, less niche, and less touchy, I guess. So I put a lot of those videos on my Patreon. I don't want to like plug my Patreon just because I don't want to like be like, oh, here's my Patreon. But a lot of the videos that aren't available anymore, I usually put them on there. I've been meaning to put my old channel's videos on there too. The ones that aren't blasphemous, at least not obviously blasphemous, where I don't know what jokes are in it, basically. On there as well. It's just that there's so many that it takes a while for it to all processed through. But yeah, everything's basically on Patreon now. Mostly so that way there's a bit of a filter of people who used to like my old stuff, used to basically encourage me going down a certain path that I basically resent. I just cannot stomach that path. I see it as very self-destructive. And pushing them away and just only keeping people where it's like, if you genuinely like these videos, it's here, basically. Are you drinking coffee? No, it's black tea. I can't drink coffee for some reason. Is that a PlayStation brand? I don't know if it's a PlayStation brand headset. Let's see. Oh, it refreshed. Okay. Okay, someone ended up saying, why are there Ursin Yesser says, why there are denominations and religions. As a Muslim, I don't believe in Sunni and Shia. I don't neither believe in Kurdistans. I honestly just think that whoever sent the $5 chat, thank you once again. It just has the letter E on it. I just think it's just, at least within Christianity, it's either culturally based, where when it comes to Orthodoxy or Catholicism, the differences are really just rooted in the respective territories that they're in. So like Coptic Christians are different than Eastern Christians or Eastern Orthodox Christians in some details of their faith, but in reality, it's still pretty cohesive as like one brand of religion. But it's mostly just a difference between being like in the Middle East versus in Eastern Europe. Likewise with the Catholics, it's like just different parts express Christianity in different ways. So I imagine the same can be applied to Islam. But then you have Protestantism, where it's just basically people ripping stuff out of Christianity, putting things in, trying to basically tailor Christianity into like this new church that repeats elements that were once condemned as heresies in the early Christian days for specific reasons, that they're now like, oh, well, we reinvented or we reclaimed this early Christian belief system. And it's like, well, it was condemned before for specific reasons, but I guess you'll re-find out the reasons why it didn't work before. But anyways, that's kind of why there's different denominations. Usually it's culturally, or it's just like a disagreement of like doctrine or the nature of the religion. Let's see. Can you do a video of interviewing you to join the Manson family? That's funny. That's a good one too. I did something like that in my last channel, but I might do it again. I don't know. I'm very interested in these weird, like, culty things, I guess. It's just like I have a strong dislike for fringe secular groups that pretend to have divinity within them, that then brainwash people into that cult. And it just annoys me, basically. Let's see. Oh, it refreshed. Someone says if I can do more Puerto Rican Spanish lessons. Sure. I've been meaning to do more like Puerto Rican or Latina videos just because I like them. So might as well. Plus, I need to practice my Spanish more. I fear I'm losing it a little more. Angelica, how many degrees do you have? Let's just say I have at least 2. You seem to have a strong stance and knowledge on religion. Is there anything else you feel this way about? I guess maybe like family. Family, education, personal growth, also seeing the people I love be taken care of, stuff like that. I think that once you have like the reason I have such a deep relationship with faith and religion is because it has opened up all of my other faculties and has opened up all of my other capacities. So it's kind of like having like a first deep breath of fresh air after being kind of choked by smog for so long. So the more I center myself in God, the more it feels like all of these capacities are opening up, I guess. Do you read the Bible? If so, what's your verse? Our favorite verse? I do. I have a couple of favorite verses. I'm trying to think if there's a favorite one. It's just that there's some verses that I like too much, kind of like Revelation 2, 1 through 7. That one I like just because it, in a sort of like, you're not supposed to interpret Revelation just because it's supposed to mean like the fall of, civilization or the collapse of a civilization empire. Like apocalypse, I think just means like the end of a civilization. But that one kind of to me seems like it's undeniably about like heresies and sects. So that one I kind of like as well. Like I like Bible verses that are critical of the modern age, but I also like Bible verses that give me a lot of peace. But there's also another one. I can't remember where in the, I know it was Genesis, but I don't know like which verse in Genesis it was, like Genesis 2:3 or Genesis 3:2. I can't remember. But it was basically the one where God curses the serpent for having tempted Eve, and he says that as a part of his curse that he is to crawl on his belly for the rest of his days, and that the only thing he will eat is ash. And if you notice, there's a lot of medieval paintings, a lot of medieval Catholic and Orthodox paintings that depict Lucifer as eating human beings. So basically, when God says you will be condemned to eat ash, then Lucifer then tries to have people live according to their flesh. So whether it's out of wrath or the seven deadly sins, if you live according to your flesh, where you separate yourself from God, then because you have only lived by the flesh, once your flesh dies, Lucifer will eat your body, like he will eat your soul or your life force or whatever. So that's kind of something that I like, where when God says you will be condemned to eat ash, he's eating the ash that the souls of those who chose to live according to their flesh then gave back to Lucifer. Or not gave back, but basically let him eat, I guess. So that's something that I really liked, where I was like, oh, that all ties together. Same thing with like how he then curses him to slither on his belly. I'm like, oh, people then say, oh, did snakes have legs? And I'm like, maybe they had wings. And it was like, this is the dragon or whatever. So there's things like that that I like, where it's like, it kind of piques my fantasy kind of like vibe, but it doesn't feel like fantasy. It's just like real. And it just makes sense as to why it is that globally you then have all of these depictions of dragons, whether it's in Asia or in Europe or in the Americas or whatever. Everyone has the same concept of like different mythos or whatever. Danny Abel says, "What is your opinion on Vatican II? In my opinion, I think people misinterpret a lot of it." I mean, I might misinterpret it just because I didn't complete my Catholic classes, but I just don't like it. I feel like by stripping Latin from Mass and then by trying to make the Catholic Church appeal more to the secular world, it just did what the Catholic Church has a bad habit of doing. Excuse me. Which is basically trying to like compromise on its own identity, compromise on its own practices, compromise on its own like tradition to appeal to people who couldn't care less either way. And then by doing so, you then alienate those who had a deep relationship with that tradition or ritual or that identity, basically. And then simultaneously, they then try to condemn those who have that deep relationship with that identity by saying, oh, well, we're not going to allow any Latin in any church. And when it comes to traditional Latin Mass, we're going to try to get rid of it more and more. So those are my issues on Vatican II. It just weakened the church, in my opinion. Oh, it refreshed again. Okay. I'm just going to start going from the bottom, I guess. What's the old path you say? Henry W. says, what was that old path you say viewers were trying to encourage you to go on? It's like every time I would do anything or say anything that was clearly a red flag where it's like I would make videos signaling like being in despair or hitting rock bottom or feeling like I was going insane or whatever. Pretty much like as the pandemic was starting, people would just be like, yes, queen. Oh, of course. Super relatable. Queen. Yeah, slay. And anytime I would make a mistake or a bad choice, they would then be like, slay queen, of course. Yeah, keep going. And anytime someone would come along with a genuine sense of like criticism or a genuine sense of like maybe she's not doing well, they would then be rushed off from the fan base saying, you don't belong here, you are not one of us, she doesn't want you here. And it's like that really annoyed me because I'm like, who are you to like shove off these people who are actually like expressing a genuine sentiment, number one, which is not found within those type of circles who go like, yes, queen. Like they can't even fathom being genuine. Like everything is just a show to them. It's like a facade on top of a facade on top of a facade. It's like a character on top of a character. It's just vacuous and empty. They have no identity. That's why they latch on to these trends or these micro trends. And it just upset me because I'm like, if I'm clearly struggling, why is everyone treating it like a fashion show? If that makes sense. So I couldn't stomach that. And then by the time I ended up becoming Christian and making that public knowledge, then they all started criticizing that, trying to, at best, they were trying to qualify it and say, well, you're not like an actual Christian, right? You're like one of those Christians that are like progressive. And it's like, no, actually, I'm like genuinely Christian. Like, you can't be progressive and Christian. That's just, they're not compatible. That's you basically corrupting your faith in Christ and selling it out for the world. Like, that's just, you're either Christian or you're not. And it just upset me. So then I'm like, I really don't want anyone like this in my life, not online, not in person. I don't want anyone who reminds me of this around me because you cannot trust them when you're actually going down rock bottom. At best, they'll be the type of people to basically take advantage of you financially, emotionally, however. And then they'll just encourage you to keep hurting yourself. And then if you were to ever really hurt yourself, then they would just consider it like a vibe. So it's just annoying to me. Um, let's see. Someone, uh, the username is like a bunch of symbols, but someone said, "Can you talk about Freemasonry and your thoughts on it?" I know you sort of hinted at the ritualistic tendencies, if you will, in your latest Beyonce ASMR video. I just don't like Beyonce. That's a controversial take. I just don't like her. She's like overrated in my opinion. She always calls herself a goddess, and I'm like, you're really not. And then it's like, I don't know, it's just so annoying. I liked old Beyonce, just like I liked old Taylor Swift, but now both of them are just obnoxious in my opinion. I can't listen to their music. But as for Freemasonry, I don't really think Freemasonry is as commonly dark as people make it out to seem. Freemasonry is basically just the European response to wanting to raise capital outside of the Catholic Church because usury, which is you basically charging exponential interest, or I forgot the term for it. I think it's exponential interest, no? Compound interest, where you basically multiply it based on multiplying it or whatever. Um, that was condemned mortally. It's a mortal sin. You'll end up in hell under Catholic terms for doing that. So once King Henry VIII ended up abolishing Catholicism from England, and then Germany followed suit, basically that entire Anglo-Saxon area started to promote Freemasonry, which was basically a merchant union where they would then practice usury to raise capital for those countries. But then they would strip the countries of their religious foundation and only bolster up their national identity, which then corrupted itself. And now there's no national identity whatsoever in those countries because then that gets sold out for economic interests. But yeah, Freemasonry is it's just like a money grab, but with all money grabs that are devoid of soul. Then you get into like the alleged 33rd degree Freemasonry, where that one is supposed to have like human bad things happen. And a lot of the rituals, if they're really practiced there, the pseudo rituals that are practiced in like the lower tier Freemason lodges or whatever, I don't know, there's weird rituals where it's like certain marriages that are just really weird, and then certain things that are mentioned during those like pseudo rituals that are also really weird. So yeah, it's just ugh. But I don't think Beyonce's part of the Freemasons. If anything, she's part of I don't really think it has a name. People say it's like Illuminati, but I really don't know. It's just like she's part of circles, basically. Like there's no way that she and P. Diddy and all of these different people aren't on the same wavelength, like a certain type of wavelength that's been practiced before. Like there's nothing new under the sun, as the Bible says. Let's see. Neat says, do you think that you are smarter than the magisterium of the Holy Catholic Church? Not really, but I think Pope Leo, I think it was, the 10th or 12th, the Pope that was in power, or the Pope that was on the throne during World War II, he warned that the Catholic Church was going to be corrupted from the inside and that there were a lot of figures that were trying to subvert it, which also explains why the nature of the church has changed so much and why it's kind of weakened over the years. Thankfully, though, I think it's starting to gain traction again just because of how bad modern society has gotten. But yeah, I'm like, when it comes to the catechism, that was also made in like the 1890s. It's like all of these reforms that have happened are just modern age reforms to the church. And it just feels like the concept of like changing these rituals or traditions to appeal to a modern age corrupts the nature and tradition of the church, which is the reason I like Orthodoxy, because it's pretty much stayed steadfast to the practices and rituals of the church originally. Let's see. Oh, it refreshed. Liquid Psyche says, have you seen that dumb Beyonce University course? I have not. I do remember when Jay-Z ended up charging like two fans 500K each just to have dinner with him so that way he could teach them how to become like successful rappers or whatever. And it turned out to be a complete bust. And I'm like, what did you think it was? Like, this is ridiculous. Let's see. Do you plan on recording more video documentaries for your other channel? I don't think I would call it, well, are they documentaries? I don't know. I mean, technically, but not, I don't know. But yes, I have a video essay already finished that I need to type up on Phyllis Schlafly's life. And I'm going to upload that one soon. And then I also plan on uploading a video commenting on the whole like fitness Nala situation, the girl with the who used to have red hair that appeared on the Whatever podcast. And her like transformation and all of the backlash that she's getting. So I'm planning on making a video commenting on that as well. Vinicius Avalar says, how do you feed your faith on hard times? Examples given are temptations, disbelief, or lack of faith. I would say honestly just reading scripture or just books from the church fathers. When it comes to temptations, I usually keep in mind that Satan doesn't necessarily relish it when you sin. He relishes it when you feel like you're unforgivable. At that point, then when you start to despair, that's when he knows that he can really fully have you in his grasp. But yeah, it's like when it comes to sin or temptation, it's like you've made a mistake, which is literally the definition of a sin, is that you've made a mistake. But it's not something to really consume yourself with. If you start to consume yourself with it, then you don't have trust in Christ's sacrifice or unconditional love for you. Or just basically, if there is a condition, which is just repent. But when you repent and you feel bad for it, and you clearly do when you start to feel like you're a terrible person, then, you know, Christ has forgiven you, and you can try again the next day and make choices that lead you closer to Christ rather than away from him. As for disbelief, I think I've reached a point in my life where I currently have never really struggled with disbelief just because I had such a strong conviction that God didn't exist, that to be disproven, now I have a strong conviction that he does exist because I was disproven when I had a strong conviction against it. And it just makes everything make sense to me. So I don't think I could struggle with disbelief again. But I think that when you struggle with disbelief, I think that you should probably search for materials that kind of give more reinforcement to biblical stories. So, for example, looking through the Bronze Age to kind of find out the context of what happened up until like Moses's time, to see where these stories came from, and realizing that there's a pattern going on that supports why the Bible was written this way. It's like this constant pattern reemerging, and then going through the Iron Age to basically discover all of these different figures after Moses that, came along and started to whatever, all of the emperors that then ruled during the New Testament, or yeah, during the New Testament. So I would say look through things archaeologically or historically, see how they all add up and how the Bible just yet to contradicts itself. Nick Cara says, if compound interest is a one-way ticket to hell, what does that make the standard practices of modern creditors and investment banks? Oh yeah, it's like, for me, if you're gonna ask me as an individual, I have like complete satisfaction knowing that everyone who excuses robbing the general public of their money, their hard-earned money, as a means of just gaining capital or making money off of their hard labor and then whatever, I have like complete satisfaction knowing that they will be punished. It's like, this was immoral, God hated it, and you will be punished for even normalizing it. I love it. It's like there's even paintings where it says those who committed usury being thrown into hell during medieval times. And I'm like, this is excellent. You're telling me that everyone who's like at the top of JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, all of these huge banks or whatever, the way that they like completely destroy our country from within, did you think that was morally okay? Did you think that, oh, well, someone lied and they might have to like whatever, they might get put. Did you think that they were going to get away with something so devious? Like, no. But let's see. Ah, it refreshed. Joseph Adekunle says, don't you think we should allow people to have any choice they believe in and then they can complete their own will under God? Sure. Like everyone has free will to believe in God. That's why he gave it to us. That's about it. There's consequences though. If you end up believing in a God that encourages child brides or that encourages certain practices that follow like circumcision, where then someone has to kind of do something nasty to you, or if you follow practices that involve like complete degeneracy in the public, lasciviousness that you're trying to encourage within younger kids that then have consequences such as higher rates of STDs or whatever, then yeah, just from like a pragmatic governmental social pro-social like lens, God and his morality aside, there needs to be something addressed for those behaviors where it's like this is not allowed just within the governance of the country. Like just because God allows us to have free will doesn't mean that those people can then practice those things free will. It's like, oh, well, God gave us free will. Okay, cool. When someone murders someone, which is against God's will, he gave them the free will to choose what he wanted to do. He chose to murder. So does that mean that we're just going to let him keep murdering just because God gave him free will? No, we're going to imprison him so that way he can't take away anyone else's life, because then you're encroaching on someone else's free will. So likewise, it's like if someone's engaging in activity that's going to harm the public health of the society at large, like encouraging new diseases to then enter into the public society, or then encouraging people to engage in like social breaking habits or behaviors, or is encouraging a framework or a viewpoint that then corrodes the moral fabric of the society from which the governance happens, then yeah, there also has to be punishment coming from there. But just from like a governance point of view, which is like obvious, that's just how any society has always functioned. Henry W. says, what made you believe in God? Um, I ended up reading the Bible, and I don't know, it took me a little while. Like, it just surprised me how wise the scriptures were and how they lined up with historical and archaeological contexts. How it felt like I was reading a book that was basically explaining the modern day, but yet connecting it to ancient societies, and how those ancient societies were even referenced in universities nowadays to validate or like give credence to certain behaviors now becoming popular today by saying, oh, well, the Canaanites practiced this, so that means we should too. Or, they did this, so that means we should too. And it's like, oh, you're sourcing these behaviors from biblical accounts to give yourself more credence. So that also kind of like made me reconsider a lot of the validity within the Bible, where it's like, you're basically telling me what's going to happen, what's going on. And it's just so succinct. Um, but as for the concept of God, I think the way I started to believe in God himself as like the inspiration for the Bible was just acknowledging that, and I guess it's just like a philosophical exercise, but if there's this pit of evil that exists in the world, and you're trying to contrast that by saying, well, how do I know that's evil? Like, how do I know that causing people harm is evil? How do I know that certain behaviors that are just gross and degenerate is evil? How do I know that this is evil? You would have to contrast that with something good. And it's like, where does good then come from? Like, where exactly do you then draw this idea of goodness? And then people might say, like, you just know it by its positive or negative consequences. But then it's like, okay, well, that's cause and effect. If that's cause and effect, then what exactly caused everything in our knowledge to then coagulate, essentially? Because as previously mentioned, like the Canaanite societies thought that a lot of the things that we now consider evil were good because it's just something that they enjoyed. And a lot of people now define just enjoying something as being good, but it has a lot of negative consequences. So it's like, where exactly do you derive your meaning of good from? And then when you start to associate the idea that love and goodness is coming from our understanding or our life source from God, and that's why in the scripture it says that if you remove a person from God, they start to die because it's like they start to self-destruct. It started to all make sense to me. And then I was like, oh, there has to be a God, because the more you get closer to God, it's like the healthier of a person you become. Meanwhile, if you remove yourself from God, it's like then your life starts to fall apart. You can't really sustain a marriage. You can't really sustain relationships with people that are outside of like just vanity and being and playing this facade. And then moreover, you might even start to, if you fall on hard times, you start to cope with things that will become your new gods, like addictions or whatever. So that's kind of how I landed on it. It's a really like messy explanation because there was just so much that went into it, but that was kind of aspects of it. What do you think of President Milei? He increased the GDP in Argentina, which was nice, but I still have my questions on him, where I don't entirely trust him. What disproved your disbelief, please? Um, Basically that. I just felt like if one trusts themselves as God, then everything that the scripture tells you will happen, then will happen. Meanwhile, if you trust in God, everything that they say will happen, then happens. And it's like, there's deeper arguments than that, but that was something that kind of first clicked in my brain, where I was like, oh, this is all lining up with what is in the book. But then on a larger scope, it was just like, I don't know, those cliche arguments where it's like, well, then what caused existence? Like there had to have been some God source, where a Catholic priest ended up discovering the Big Bang Theory. So in the book, it says in the beginning there was nothing, and then there was light. And it's like, oh well, that could be like a kind of way of God saying, well, then there was the Big Bang Theory, where it's like then everything just came into being. And then with the Big Bang Theory, it just says that hydrogen and carbon and nitrogen and I forgot what the fourth element was. Hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, and then this fourth element. We're all rotating in like perfect harmony or whatever, and then something just made it pop or whatever. Let's see. Oh, it refreshed. Alex K says, do you believe that anyone who doesn't believe in God will go to hell? Not necessarily. I think that if you consciously reject God, that by rejecting God, God respects your free will. So naturally, he's not going to force you to be with him, which is in heaven, which is like his dwelling place. He's going to respect your free will and say, okay, well, you can go into the space that I'm completely absent from, but the spaces that are completely absent of God are naturally hell. So it's not like he's sending you to hell because you were a bad person. It's just that you wanted to do this. You wanted this environment. You liked doing this. This is practiced in this area away from God. And anything that is away from God is just hellish, if that makes sense. It's like people who enjoy having a ton of sex. It's like God's not going to send you to hell just because you did something bad or naughty or whatever. And he's like, okay, well, you arbitrarily broke the rules. This is where you go. It's just that if you go to heaven where sex is not practiced, you're going to get bored. You're not going to like it there. Your soul never wanted to be there. Your soul is craving this habit or act that you've engaged in your entire life, that you've always enjoyed, you've never repented from, you've always liked it. This is practiced in hell. So this is naturally what you're going to like, supposedly. But then when you get there, you realize that you're around a bunch of other people just like yourself who have no boundaries, who have all treated themselves and their own boundaries as their own gods. And they feel like they can do whatever, be however, blah, 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 blah. Just like people do now, they feel like they can rule over themselves. And if that's the case, you're going to be around a bunch of people who are the most insufferable, malevolent, just nasty people, me first, me second, me third, in hell. That's what makes it hellish. It's just being around all of those creatures that are filled with everything that God warned you against, if that makes sense. So I don't think that people who don't believe in God will go to hell, just because there's a lot of people who don't know what's going on. Like they don't know better. And I feel like if they're caught in ignorance, then their free will wasn't truly enacted. But if they consciously do it, then yeah. What do you think is the most problematic thing in today's society? In the Western Hemisphere, I think that the most problematic thing is probably a corrosion of like religious and cultural identity. And also, subsequently, then you have all of these like perverts taking advantage of that and trying to completely redefine a lot of boundaries that are in place to keep those within that nation safe, such as like age of consent laws and such things like that. Oh, it refreshed. Sungazer says, have you found a church home? We can also discuss things that are not religious. I'm just saying. But yes, it's in the Orthodox Church. Al says, what got you into ASMR? I basically said that I liked going to the doctors and that I didn't understand why people don't like going to the doctor. And someone told me that that's like ASMR, that you like it when someone gives you that sort of like personal attention. And from there, I ended up just realizing, I was like, oh, I ended up looking it up on YouTube just to see what it was about. And at that time, there really weren't any videos on it. Thankfully, honestly, I can't stand how saturated ASMR is. Like, it's not so much that it's saturated, it's just that it's so obnoxious. It's like a bunch of weird, lame people with like no personality, just being all like, yes, sis. Oh my God, I hope this makes you fall asleep. Yes. Oh my God, yes, yes. And it's like all these acrylic nails and then like all of these, like, I don't know, they all look the same. And it's just like, you're not original, you're not funny, it's just so obnoxious and it's just so much of it. And then YouTube only recommends that. And I'm like, I like the ones that are more like gentle whispering or a little more like toned down or just like more personable, something that just feels like a normal person talking, not some like wannabe Perez Hilton whore or whatever. So yeah, horse or whatever. But yeah, that's kind of what got me into ASMR. Let's see. It keeps going up. If you watch ASMR for yourself, what do you watch and what triggers do you like? Asks Max Karnak. I have a playlist of ASMR that I like watching. Let me see if I can pull it up. I can't really think off the top of my head. I know I like this one girl who has like this Jersey accent, but it was from a long time ago. Don't get a move to what's right for me. Let's see. So I like Cozy Community ASMR. I like Alex Oplex ASMR. There's a couple of videos here that I also like where it's just random like neurology or instant induction videos. I like Dong ASMR. He's a bigger name, but he's funny. It's like he's a genuinely funny guy who puts a lot of like attention to his videos. I like Cosmic Connector ASMR. He's an Orthodox ASMR creator. He's very unique, and I don't know which flavor of Eastern European he is, so I'm not going to assume since they all have tension with each other. But he's really good. Um, Obviously, I like Pelagia. Um, I don't know. I can't really like narrow it down. Oh, Molly Jane. It's the Nikki the hairdresser, Nikki the nail salon type of like ASMR. And then obviously Karuna Satori. I've liked her for years though. I've mentioned her multiple times. Lately I've been getting into Patrick's ASMR. His ASMR is pretty unique. It's like a bunch of motion. I just like softer like ASMR that's just like I don't know, a lot more absorbing. I don't like the type of ASMR where it's like, "Ah, yes, girl," and it's just like all of these like I can't stomach it. It just becomes like this anime convention type of ASMR, and it's always nauseated me. But let's see. Do you go to college or do you have a job aside from YouTube? Yes, honestly, for the majority of my YouTube career, I've always had a job just because it keeps me sane. I feel like the only times in which I haven't had a job while doing YouTube were times in which I should have had a job because it keeps me sane. And I'm still taking classes. I just constantly like taking classes. So yeah. Um, yeah. Yes to both. Um, well, let's see. Mikara, I think I already answered a question from you, but he says, I don't know if I would see sex addicts as malevolent and malicious, just vain and superficial, consumed by short term gratification, and therefore fundamentally broken, but not strictly evil. I don't think any individual is like truly evil. I think they can be consumed with evil, but they're not truly evil. But yeah, it's like most everyone who has an addiction or most everyone who struggles with something usually is struggling with something that broke them. And in that breakdown, it's like you can choose to either to succumb to your fleshy desires or to seek something grander than yourself and find comfort in that, which is why you then get a bunch of like liberals or leftists saying, oh, you bent to Christianity, you allowed yourself to be brainwashed by Christianity, oh, you had to have a stronger mind than that. And it's like they're basically mad that you didn't choose the fleshy desires path because that's the entire basis of their entire cult. um, but I don't think that anyone's truly evil. I just think that if you use people as objects for your own gratification, if that's where you derive your sense of pleasure, it becomes a religion in and of itself, which is why you see a lot of people who participate in that lifestyle turning it practically into their entire personality because their person is pretty much consumed with that lifestyle. And if they truly enjoy it, they are going to cause a lot of pain and harm to other people because then you're just basically spreading disease or having out of wedlock children that then you might force someone to end the life of. And all of these negative consequences then come, which then do corrode your spirit even more and make you feel like a terrible person, which you can then accept and say, oh, I am a terrible person or whatever. Or you can reject and say, I do need to change my life. But I never think that they're consumed with evil. I think you can just get more and more consumed with evil based off each action that you take going down the line. It's kind of like that movie Nefarious from Amazon. I like that movie, but it kind of explains it well. Where it's like when it comes to demonic possession, it's not like one little act or one little play with the Ouija board or one little play with palm reading or whatever is going to get you demonically possessed. It's like repeated actions that lead you down a certain path, where then you're basically completely enslaved to this demonic influence or whatever. Oh, Marcus B. Urameshi says, have you ever not been able to feel ASMR anymore for a short period? For some reason, I can't feel it anymore. I feel that a lot. Yeah, it happens. It's just that the triggers and the tactics become very predictable. So then when you watch the content, it's no longer a surprise to your brain. So it doesn't really like trigger that sort of like feeling of, ooh. But then once new trends come along, new triggers, new people, whatever come along, then it kind of starts to react again. Or just when you take a pause from your favorite creators and then go back to it, then it kind of starts to react again. But yeah, I do feel that numbness. It's something that everyone feels every once in a while, but then it comes back again. Um, Lavender Ladies Cottage says, do you enjoy Beatles yet? Who is your favorite Beatle? No one's ever going to be able to knock out this obsession of mine. I do love the Beatles, and my favorite Beatle throughout my entire life has been George Harrison, but I have been gaining like a really deep appreciation for Paul McCartney. John Lennon is, I like him because he's a Beatle, and I get why he had such a like rough, to say the least, latter half of his life, considering the first half of his life. But yeah, he's just a very sensitive figure, basically. And Ringo's fine, but Ringo also has his issues. They all had their issues. Let's see. Oscar Mitchell says, what's your favorite Beatles album? I would say, honestly, it's not a good option considering how everyone's always like, oh, I like Rubber Soul, or I like Revolver, or I like the White Album. I like Beatles for Sale. That one's my favorite. It's just so simple. It was their last album where they still had that sort of like peppy sort of like energy, but still had it imbued with their own personality, their own take on it, before the whole like 60s culture started to seep in and made them think that they were bigger than they actually, I mean, they were huge, but it started to kind of give them a bigger head, which then subsequently gave everyone in the latter half of the 60s bigger heads, thinking that they were like breaking cultural norms and rebelling against modern society. And it's like, oh no, you had a great economy. You came from a nuclear family where all of you had two parents at home unless there was some tragedy that happened. Oh, what terrible times. And then it's like now you lay in the groundwork for all of the degeneracy that we've seen now, where it's like in the 70s, it was common to be a latchkey kid. And nowadays it's just common to see your parents just completely be like, actually, sweetie, mommy's life is first. And like, if I don't put myself first, then like you're like absorbing too much of my life. I don't know. It's like we've just gotten so bad and so selfish as like a society. And then everyone from the 60s basically takes accountability and says, we did this, we rebelled, you're welcome. So I just, in general, I can't listen to latter half of 60s music for that reason. It's like every time they're so cool or thinking they're so cool, I'm like, you ruined society. Like you're taking pride in the fact that you're helping society ruin itself. Why would you do this? I cannot stomach the countercultural movement. Let's see. Will asks, which groups of people have the most outsized influence on today's world? On one hand, I want to say Christians, just because the years that we go by are literally starting from the birth of Christ. And there's so many practices that are just Christianized. So I want to say them. But because of the United States and the Western Hemisphere wanting to import democracy for the past like over 100 years, then I also want to say the Enlightenment figures. So those who are more Luciferian or more like, yeah, pretty much Luciferian or Freemason has more influence over the world by promoting the sense of like, oh, you know, we can rest on human rationale without God. We can completely depend on our own reason. And then it's like, oh, congratulations, our own human reason has brought us to the most irrational positions within science, which is just a recycling of pagan ideas. So I don't know. I really don't know. I think it's like a battle between all of the most popular influences currently. Palm to Dragon says, "Do you like the Smiths?" I love the Smiths. What's that one line from 500 Days of Summer? I love the Smiths. To die by your side is such a heavenly way to die. But yeah, I love the Smiths. I also like Morrissey's solo career as well. Let's see. Is South Park blasphemy? I love South Park, and I've reasoned my argument in defense of it. South Park is like Family Guy, where it's just a giant humility pill, where it makes fun of everything and everyone. It's made fun of like every single religion without any favoritism. It's made fun of every single theology or philosophy or whatever. It's made fun of everything. So for that reason, I don't criticize it, because I'm like, you've made fun of everything without favoritism, without exception, like, and you did a really good job at it. So I'm like, whatever, I forgive it. Actually, Ivan Herrera says, "Do you hate Yoko Ono?" Just kidding. No. I mean, yes, but no. The only reason I dislike Yoko Ono is mostly because she basically jumped into John Lennon's marriage knowing he was married, and then pretended that she didn't know that he was married. And it's like, of course you know he's married. Like, literally, like, who doesn't know he's married? That was like even televised. Like, everyone knows he's married. And even then, it's like, once you found out that he is married, why would you continue to jump literally in the middle of their marriage? Like, literally, like in India, when Cynthia finally caught up to John Lennon, which was his fault too, then they were in this limo together in India, where then Yoko Ono apparently tagged onto the visit or whatever, and she jumped in the middle between them, knowing that that was his wife, and then just kept flirting with him the entire time while his wife was sitting right next to her. And I'm like, and then after John Lennon passed away, there was an inheritance for Julian Lennon, but Yoko Ono decided to sell Julian Lennon's inheritance back to him, including the letters that John Lennon and Julian Lennon wrote to each other in correspondence, including the like guitars and all of the memorabilia that John wanted to give to Julian. Yoko Ono sold all of those pieces back to Julian, and Julian bought them all, wanting pieces of his father that he was estranged from, essentially, even though they weren't truly estranged, because they would still have contact and he would still visit and spend whatever amount of time with him. But excuse me. Yeah, I hate her, honestly. I don't like her. Not because she broke up the Beatles. That was more so like the death of Brian Epstein that broke up the Beatles. But I hate her. I don't like her. Do you play any instruments or sing? I can play guitar. I know piano chords, and I physically can sing, but I cannot sing well. No. Let's see. Lavender's Lady Cottage, hey, asks, "What is your favorite historical period? You are such a history nerd. This is a compliment." That's hard. I was recently, just right now, actually thinking about quote unquote Bloody Mary. And I guess one of my favorite historical periods is Queen Isabella the First of Castile, and then her daughter, Catherine of Aragon, and then her daughter, quote unquote Bloody Mary. And how Queen Mary basically wanted to just return the wheel back to making England Catholic, and how everyone considered her this bloody queen because she burned like 300 heretics at the stake or whatever over the course of, I think, like 12 years or something. Meanwhile, then when her sister, Queen Elizabeth I, ends up taking the throne as a Protestant queen, making England Protestant, she then kills 35,000 English people for whatever political reasons she could find. And she's heralded as this queen of the golden age, which I guess that might be one of my favorite periods, just because I've been obsessed with it my entire life. I feel like that's an introductory history period for anyone, though. I've also been kind of obsessed with just figuring out like biblical lore when it comes to the Mesopotamian age, when it comes to the Hittites and the Moabites, which the Moabites came out of the affair, quote unquote affair. I don't even like using that word. That's disgusting. But what basically Lot, or rather Lot's daughters, did to Lot, like the children that came from that conception became the Moabites, and I think the Hittites as well. And seeing how all of these different tribes kind of intermingled and all of that jazz. So I've been kind of obsessed with that historical lore as well. And I've also been obsessed with, I guess, Roman politics, where their conception of the Senate versus their conception of a Caesar, and how the United States government kind of parallels that. And I've also been kind of obsessed with the conception of the United States as well, where it's like, um, I was reading up on Leif Erikson and Columbus's first voyages to the Americas and his correspondence with King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. And I don't know, I've been kind of like all over the map with some cliche historical eras. Connecting says, "So you're not a hippie, lol." No. When I was a teenager, I would identify as such just because I loved 60s music. But now I condemn it. I'm like, I hate it. I hate it so much. I understand all of the squares from that era. They were so right. They were just a bunch of like drugged up idiots trying to destroy society for no reason other than just like, oh, we can do it better our way. And it's like, okay, well, it's okay, boomer. Well, now you have no responsibility whatsoever, even to your own grandchildren or children. So it's almost like your parents did it the best, and yet you rebelled against them and think you're better for it. Let's see. Hmm. I'll answer one more question, or maybe two more questions, just because we've gone over an hour. But let's see. Oscar Mitchell says, if you could meet one figure from the Bible excluding Jesus, who would you choose? Hmm. I don't know, actually. Probably, maybe. I've thought about this before, but then I just think of how it would naturally go. So I kind of lean towards like King David or Solomon, but I feel like they were such womanizers that it's like if I were to start asking them questions, they would just try to like riz me up and be like, "Girl, you know you ain't interested in that." And it's like, "Could you just answer the question, please?" Um, I'm trying to think. Maybe I don't know. Hmm. I'm kind of interested in the Virgin Mary. Maybe the Virgin Mary just because I want to know what her personality was like. Like what made you so unique for your day and age? Like I want to know what your character was like because it's like that's like the perfect example for women to follow. So what were you like in real life? Like what were you like in person then? Um maybe her. Hmm. Or maybe Nebuchadnezzar from Babylon. That would also be kind of an interesting guy to talk to. Just like what are you seeing from everything going on? Like what's going on here? So yeah, I think those one of those two. Let's see. That's an interesting question. Cleberson John asks, where came your interest in pseudosciences like phrenology? In general, I feel like our society is ruled by pseudosciences, where the data itself is not empirically created, but rather navigated from political interests. So if people reach conclusions that deviate or disagree with politically motivated conclusions, then that data then has to be destroyed or amended to suit political conclusions. So I think everything nowadays is just pseudoscience. And I think that every science that has pretty much come out, or not every science, but most sciences that have come out, whether it's in the medical field or whether it's like just reflecting on historical record or whatever, or not historical record, but I guess archaeological record, I feel like a lot of those are just pseudosciences or soft sciences, you could say, where it's just so malleable and it's so opinion oriented. And there's just, I don't respect them at all. It's like, oh, lobotomies failed. Let's start chemically lobotomizing everyone. Oh, that didn't work. So let's just treat everyone like a guinea pig and keep experimenting on their minds, their immune systems, their physiques, or whatever. But as for phrenology, I like it because it's not invasive. You just basically feel someone's head and you're like, oh, this is your personality. And it's like, oh, interesting. Or physiognomy, where it's like, oh, well, your characteristics of your face are like this. And I kind of like how detail oriented it is, where it's like someone is really looking at your face and trying to determine how it's arranged itself based off of your habits or whatever. So I kind of like it just because it gives you a different lens through which you can process people's interaction with the world, I guess. But I think that'll be what ends it for tonight. Thank you everyone for joining this live stream, the 100K celebration of this channel. I will be hosting another live stream for the 125K live stream celebration of this channel. So I'm going to be hosting like a live stream celebration every 25K on this channel, just to have some fun with it, I guess, keep things organized. But yeah, so I'll see you then, hopefully, maybe. And I hope you guys have a good night and take care. Bye-bye.